Hey everyone, this is Mike Litwin from LitwinCreative, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a vintage style postcard using Adobe Photoshop. This video is sort of a follow-up to a tutorial that I posted about a week and a half ago, in which I showed you how to put images and photography inside of letter forms. And if you happen to have watched that video, you will remember that the end result looked something like this. And with each one of these photos here inside of an individual letter. And I had mentioned in that video that this is very popularly used in vintage postcards that say greetings from, and then the name of the state, and then something like wish you were here, or some sort of a well wish like that. This is obviously this end result we got was much more functional than it is beautiful. So today we're going to be going through the steps on how to get from this to this. And there are several different ways to do this. I'm going to go through my way of doing it. I found that it's probably the easiest way to do through Photoshop. It's not terribly difficult, but it is a little arduous in that there are a fair number of steps to do this. So just hang in there with me. We'll go step by step. And if you have not seen the original video and you would like to go watch that tutorial to get back to this starting point that we'll be starting from in this video, the link for that will be in the description below. Otherwise, let's go ahead and jump right in. The first step in this process is going to be to warp our text. Now, what do I mean when I say warping our text? Well, if you remember from the last tutorial, our end result had the word state, and it was very, very much just straight and plain and just regularly typeset. But you'll notice that in the postcard version, it's up in this little wavy, flowy kind of form. That is what we're talking about when we say warping text. And so that's the first step of what we're going to show you here today. So let's go ahead and open up our original file. And if you watched the last video, you remember last time I was working at a nice low resolution of 72 dpi, dots per square inch, because I wanted to do things very quickly. However, since we started to do this video, I realized that we would want to show you how to prep this for print. And in the last video, I mentioned that if you were doing a print job, you would want a resolution that was significantly higher, ideally somewhere around 300 dpi, 300 dots per square inch. So I've gone ahead and I have done that here. We are still working at a size of 6 inches wide by 4 inches tall, but you'll notice that I have upped the resolution from 72 to 300. Now, of course, when I did that, it took all my photos and it upsampled them, and that created some problems here. As you can see in the demo that I did, all of these photos are very, very blobby and chunky because they were taking a small photo and blowing it up really big. So what I've done prior to starting this video is I've gone ahead in here and I have replaced everything with a higher resolution photo. So the end result should be crisp and clean. And ideally, we would actually not be placing these photos inside of the letters until after we'd already done our work anyway. But since this is where we were starting from last time, I've gone ahead and I've replaced those with higher resolution images now. Before we even get started, let's go ahead and save our file as a different name. And we're going to call this Vintage Postcard. All right, and so let's go ahead and get started on showing you how to warp your text. What we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our layers palette, and there is the layer that has the word state on it with the T here. We're going to click on that, and I'm going to double click on this T right here. And you'll notice that not only does it highlight all of the text, but we get some new menu options up here at the top, one of which is an icon that has a T with a curve under it, and this is the Create Warped Text tool. When we click on that, it opens up a warped text window with a little drop menu that gives us all different types of ways, shapes that we can put this text in. You can do an arc, you can do a bulge, you can make it look like a fish, and you'll notice that here you can increase the intensity of that or decrease it or put it in reverse. You can bend it horizontally so it looks like it's coming at us or going away from us, or bend it in this direction. There's a variety of things that you can do here. But one thing that you may also be noticing is that not only is it bending the text, it's also bending the box that our text was placed inside of here on the sides and all the way over here. So in order to get the highest level of accuracy, I'm going to cancel this out and I'm going to resize this box so that it is as close to the text as possible. So I'm going to grab the side here. I'm going to hold down my Option key so that both sides move in here, and I'm going to get as close to those letters as possible without them bumping down. And I'm going to go down here and pull this box up to the bottom. Now you see this box is much closer to the letters. And so now I'm going to go back over here to this layer. I'm going to double click on the T, and so it highlights all the letters. Go back up here to the Warp Text tool. And you can use any one of these that you want for this. I tend to like using the Rise version of this, and 50 is their default. I think that's a little too much. I'm going to roll this back to about half of that. So we're going to put this at around 25. That's where I'll be working here. So I'm going to hit OK. And now go back over here to my Move tool. And I'm going to go ahead and move this up a little more towards the center. Now, something you're probably already noticing is that these photographs that we had nicely placed inside these letters, well, they don't fit so well inside those letters anymore. But we're going to go ahead and fix that right now. We are going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of all of these photos and do them one at a time. So we're going to go over here to the Layers palette. I'm going to click on that little eyeball next to each one of them except for the first one. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to go up to Image. I'm going to go up to Edit and go to our free transform tool. This is Command T if you're using a Mac, and I'm going to show you this menu the first time, but then to make this quicker, I'm just going to use Command T each time we do this from here on out. We're going to go to free transform, and you can see the box around exactly where the photo is. I'm going to drag this so that it fits inside of that. And you'll notice that there's, well, no, it's actually right there in the letter where we want it. Let's move on to the next one. We'll turn on the next photo. We're going to select right here, not on the mask, but on the photo itself. We're going to hit Command T. And you'll notice here a little thing that's happened ever since we warped these letters is now the photo's not quite big enough. You got a little bit of the T at the top and bottom that's not covered. That's not a huge deal. We're just going to increase this size slightly. It's not going to be enough to degrade the photo. So we're going to make that box so that it completely covers the T, and we're going to hit Return. And you may also be noticing that here on the side we see a little bit of the black from the T underneath. That's because this layer mask has not been changed to fit the letter. You remember last time we masked each one of these letters, so these photos, so that it would fit inside the letter. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fix that. We're going to go to our brush tool. We're going to make sure white is our top color. And if you remember from last time, on a layer mask, anything that we paint white shows the photo or the image or whatever is there. And if it's black, if I reverse it to black, it paints out whatever's there. Okay, so now we have fixed the T. Let's move on to the next photo. And you can see this one is also slightly too small, so we're just going to increase the size of that so it fits inside the A. We're going to hit Return. And you see we have the opposite problem here. We're not missing any photo inside the A, but it is bleeding over into the T a little bit. So we're going to go over to the layer mask for that photo. We're going to make sure black is our top color, and we're going to paint that out so it's not intruding on any of the other letters. Let's move on to the photo inside of the T. And you can see that one is also slightly too small. We're going to increase the size of that just a little bit. And I think I would like the sunset to be right in the middle of that T. So we're going to place it like that. And you see we're missing some photo there as well. So we're going to go into the layer mask. Make sure white is our top color. And we're going to paint that back in. And then let's move on to the E. Again, we use our free transform tool. Make it just big enough to fit in there. You can see that our mask is not quite right on, but we're just going to move that whole thing over, and it shouldn't be a problem. And there we are. Now everything fits inside of our warped text that says state. And we are going to go ahead and save this. It is always a good idea to save your file as you're going along. So we're going to save that, and we are now ready to move on to the next step. Now the next step is going to be to add a stroke, actually a series of strokes to these letters, and I'll show you what that is. If we go back to our example of where we're headed here, you'll notice that each one of these letters has some borders around the edges. We have a little white border, and then we have a black border outside of that. That's what we're talking about when we say adding a stroke. And the reason that we want to do that is because these letters are obviously very visible when it's just black. Once we start putting photography in there, they get a little harder to read. And if you were to put an image behind here, like we will be doing, as you can see here in the final example, that makes these letters even harder to read. So what you'll want is we want something to differentiate these letters from each other so we can read them a whole lot easier without having to get rid of the photographs. And I'll show you how to do that now, how to add a stroke. We're going to go back to our file here. We're going to go back to our text layer that says state, and down here at the bottom of our layers palette you'll see an icon here that says FX, and we click on that. That's add a layer style, and we are going to go down here to where it says stroke. And what stroke does is, as you can see, it puts a little outline on it. Now it's already got black on here, and you have some options here. You can change the size, and as I pull this up and down, you can see it's really, really fat, or you can put a really, really skinny stroke on there. You can change the color to be pretty much any color that you want, as you can see below here. But what we're going to do first is we're going to put a white stroke on this. So I'm going to change this color to white, and I think I want this stroke to be somewhere right around 10. Now, one thing to note is there are 3 different positions that you can put the stroke in. Also, you can have it outside, like we have it now. We can have it inside, which means that the stroke is inside the letter, or we can have it from the center, meaning the center of the stroke is the edge of your letter and it just goes out in both directions. We want to do this on the outside for this project. So I have a stroke of 10 pixels wide in white outside the letters. I'm going to hit OK. And so now we have that first stroke. But as you'll notice from our example, we also have a black stroke on the outside of that. Now, the bummer about the layer effects is that you can only put 1 stroke effect per layer. So we can't do a stroke and then another stroke on the same layer. But what we can do is we can put a layer effect on a group of layers. And we're going to do that now. What we're going to do is we select our text layer with state. We're going to go ahead and also hold down the shift key and select all of our photos. We're going to drag all those layers down here to this little icon that has a file folder on it. That creates a layer group. And we drop it here. You see it's called group 1. And I'm going to name that basic text, because that was our very first text layer that we laid down. Now, what you can do is, now that you have all these together, where here, if we grabbed each one of these layers, it would just move that layer by itself. If we select this entire group, and we use our free transform tool, it moves everything all around. And it also allows us to take these layer effects and apply it to the entire layer, or to the entire group of layers. So we're going to go back down here to stroke again, and let's go ahead and change this to black. And you'll notice that now it has a secondary stroke on the outside of the first stroke. And we're going to pull this one up a bit more than we had the other one. I'm going to bring this up to 25. And hit OK. And so now we have a white stroke and a black stroke. This is pretty much where we want to go ahead and stop for now until we get to the next step. So we're going to go ahead and save, or Command S if you just want to do the short command. And now we are ready to move on to the next step, which is adding some background. Now, you'll remember from the last video, if you watched it, that I said I like to start out with a medium toned gray as my background. And the reason I like to do that is so I can see white effects and black effects. For example, if we were to turn off this black stroke and if we were just putting this white stroke on and this background were to be white, we wouldn't have been able to see what we were doing. So that's why I kept this like that. And then now that we have a white stroke and a black stroke, though, and we can see both of them pretty clearly, it's time to get rid of this gray background and start putting in what we want to use for the actual postcard itself. So I'm going to go up here to File, Open, and I have something that's already prepared. I have this old paper texture that I found out there on the interwebs somewhere, and I have a series of these I've scanned myself, but this was the quickest one I could get a hold of in my files. So I'm going to open that. We're going to select all. We're going to go to Edit, Copy. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to go back here. I'm going to make sure that my background layer is selected, and then we're going to go to Edit, Paste. And this gives us this old paper background because this is a vintage postcard. We want it to look like it's been around for a while and that it's been aged. However, this is a little more yellow than I want it to be, so we're going to do something to decrease the severity of that a little bit. We're going to go here to the background. I'm going to go make sure that white is selected as the color. I'm going to use my paint bucket tool. Let's turn this off and make that white. Now we turn this back on, and with this layer selected, with the old paper layer selected, we're going to go up to the opacity, and I'm going to pull this back a little bit so you can see through it a little bit more. And as you can see, the farther I pull it back, the less and less visible it is until you just get white. I'm going to put this somewhere right around 70, and you can see that that's a little cleaner and a little whiter than just having it yellowed at 100. So I'm going to pull it back to 70. And then I'm going to take this layer, I'm going to go up to the top right-hand corner of my layers window, under this menu, and I'm going to opt to merge down, which is Command E if you're using keyboard shortcuts. And that takes that layer and merges it down with the white layer below, so now it's all one layer all to itself. And that's now our background. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and add in our photo. Now, when these old postcards were being made back in the day, mid 20th century, they were not always something that had a lot of money put into them. They were very cheaply made, which means that the imagery wasn't always printed edge to edge. What we're going to do, because of that, is we're going to leave a little bit of a white border around the edge. And I'll show you what I mean. Let's go ahead and create a new layer here by going down here to the Create a New Layer icon. And it's layer 11. We're going to go over here to our rectangular marquee, and somewhere right around 1/4 inch in, I'm going to click, I'm going to drag, and I'm going to come all the way over here to about 1/4 inch away from 6 at the top, and 1/4 inch, or at the side, and 1/4 inch away from 4 at the bottom. So we have about 1/4 inch border around the edge. And now I'm going to go back to my trusty mid-gray, and I'm going to go to the paint bucket tool and fill that in. Now that's not going to stay gray for very long, but I want to show you what we're going to do here. I'm going to deselect that. This is the area where our photo is going to go. So now I'm going to go up to File, Open, and we're going to go back to the North Carolina photos that I had used last time. And in here I have a photo that I took at a wedding about 10 years ago that I really like. It's got this lily pad and this nice house in the background. I'm going to select all, copy it, close this out, and with our new layer 11 selected, we're going to paste this on top. Now you can see this isn't quite big enough to fill that. It's okay. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the photographs inside these letters. We're going to use our free transform tool to bring the size up just slightly. Not enough that it's going to mess with the resolution terribly. Just big enough to cover it. And then we're going to do the same thing with this photo and this gray box that we did with the photos going inside the letters. We're going to put our cursor in between the photo and the box that we want it to be in. We're going to hold down the Option key, and you can see that our icon changes, and we're going to nest that photo inside that shape, using that shape as a clipping path for the photo over top of it. Because I don't want to have too many layers hanging around, I'm now going to go up here again to the upper right-hand corner. We're going to go to the Merge Down option again, and now you see that the photo has now been merged down into the shape below it. And there you have it. Now, one thing you're probably noticing is that this photo jumps forward a lot. Even though we can still see the word state, everything's competing for attention. The background is pushing forward just as much as the foreground is. We want to go ahead and pull this back a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here to opacity, and instead of it having it at 100%, we're going to go ahead and pull this back to, let's say, around 40%. So you can still see the photo fairly well, but it's now been pushed back significantly, and the name of the state, which of course here it's state, which is a beautiful place to live, is coming forward much more. So we're going to click off of that, and now we are done with this portion of adding a background. We're going to go up here to File, we're going to save our work, and we are now ready to move on to the next step of adding some dimension to these letters. And when I say that we're going to be adding dimension to the letters, what I mean is that we're going to be applying somewhat of a 3D effect. If you look at the example of where we're trying to get to, you'll notice that the letter forms don't just stop here at the bottom with the black outline we've already put on it. It actually has a little bit of a sides to the letters here colored in this brick color that makes it pop out from the background a little bit, makes them look a little bit more 3D. That's what we're going to work on now. So we're going to go back to the file, and what we want to do is we want to make a copy of this text layer that we've already done, including both of the strokes. The bummer about that is that when we change the color of this, the strokes are still going to retain their original color. And what I mean by that is this. Let's go ahead and select this group. We're going to drag it down here to the bottom where it has the new layer icon. We're going to make a copy of it. And you can see it's called Basic Text Copy. Now, if we were to go in, even if we turned off all of the photos, and we could even trash them, and then we were to select all this and change the color of this to something else, it still keeps the white stroke and the black stroke. It doesn't color in everything. We want to color in everything. So what we're going to do is undo that. And instead what we need to do is we need to make a copy of this that is completely flattened. So what we're going to do here is go up to the top right-hand corner of the Layers window. We're going to go to this option that says Merge Group. We click that. And you can see what it's done now. It has flattened everything, including the layers, so into one unit. So what we do now is we hover over top of this layer, and we're going to hold down the Command key, and then we click on that layer, and you can see the little marching ants around the edge, the selection tool. It includes everything, including the layers, or the strokes. And so now what we do is we go up to Edit, fill, and we're going to fill this with a color. Rather than do our foreground or our background, we're going to use a custom color. And I kind of like that, that light brick red color that we were using there. We're going to hit OK, and hit OK again. And you can see that now it has filled in everything, including those strokes, with that color. Now, not to worry, it hasn't messed with what we originally had. If we turn that layer off, you can see our original basic text with all the photographs is still there, but now we have this copy. And we're going to take this copy and we're going to drag it in the layers palette underneath the text, but above the background image. And then we're going to hit Command-T with that selected so we can move it. And while we have it in transform mode, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and I'm going to drag it just a little bit at a 45-degree angle. That's why I'm holding down the Shift key. It locks it at somewhat of a 45-degree angle. We're going to pull it out to here, and then we're going to hit Return, and that's about where I want it. Right. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is, you'll notice that this is starting to give it a little bit of a 3D effect, but it really just looks like a red drop shadow. We don't want that. We're going to go ahead and add a stroke to this the same way we added a stroke to that. So let's go up here with this red layer selected, and this should look pretty familiar by now. We're going to go back down to the FX icon here, the layer effects, and we're going to go and we're going to add another stroke. And we're going to add a 25 pixel stroke with black, just like we did to this top layer. Actually, let's make it a little smaller. Let's go ahead and do a stroke of 15. Okay, so it's a little bit skinnier, but now you can see that it's starting to look a little less like a red drop shadow and a little more like it has an edge to it. We're going to hit OK. Right. So now we have our basic text layer with a stroke, we have our bottom layer with a stroke, and we're going to go ahead and we are going to put both of these in a group together. I'm going to take both of those, we're going to drag them down here to this file, and now we have one group that has everything, so if we ever need to move the whole thing around, we can hit our Command-T and it moves all of our stuff together. Now, one thing that you'll notice is we have breaks in between letters. There's a break in between the T and the A, and an A and the T, and the T and the E, but you don't see those breaks anywhere here. We have a lot of sharp corners and a lot of outside edges where we don't have anything connecting the foreground to the background. So that's what we're going to fix right now. We're going to open up our group layer here, and on top of all this, we're going to add a new layer. And we're going to go to our brush tool, and let's go ahead and zoom in here. And we are going to go ahead and right-click on our mouse. We're going to pull the hardness of this brush, and I'm using the hard round brush. We're going to pull the hardness all the way up to 100%, so it's not soft at all. We're going to take the size down to 15 pixels, which is the same width as this right here. And we are going to take from the outside of this curve, we're going to click once. Oh, first we're going to make sure that black is selected. Then we're going to click here. And then we're going to go to the outside of this curve. We're going to hold down the Shift key and click here. That was a little off. Let's try that again. We're going to go here. And then go here. And you can see this drawing a straight line, except a little sloppy straight line. That's a little better. Now it looks like they're connected. We're going to do that with every place that it looks like we would have an outside edge or a hard edge. So on the outside of this T, we would go here, we click once, hold down the Shift key, come over here, and draw a straight line. In between the T and the A, we'll do the same thing. We're going to start here, click there once, hold down the Shift key, come over here, and draw a straight line. Same thing in the middle of the A, draw a straight line there, between the A and the T. And we're not going to worry about these edges here because, as you notice, it's a little bit of a curve. And there wouldn't be a hard corner on a curved edge, so we're just going to leave that alone. But on the outside edges, we are going to go ahead and complete those edges. Same thing with the T here, with the top of the E, and any place that we have a sharp inside corner. And I think we've gotten all of our edges here. Now you can see that it looks like it's not just a drop shadow, it's not just a floating copy, but it looks like it's actually connected. From here, what we're going to do is I'm going to go up to my Move tool, and because all of this is still in one group, let's go ahead and rename this group. We're going to call it 3D Text, because that's really what this is. Okay, and now we are going to go ahead and take our Move tool, And this isn't quite exactly as big as I want it. So I'm going to, with the entire group selected, I'm going to hit Command T, and I'm going to bring this up just slightly. Like that. And now what we're going to do is, you'll notice in our end result that the outside stroke doesn't stop there. It actually has a little bit of a drop shadow. We're going to go ahead and add that as well right now. So we're going to go here to our 3D text and have our group selected. We're going to add layer effects to that entire group. And this time we're going to go down to where it says drop shadow. Now when you do a drop shadow, it's probably not going to look like what just showed up for me. Your default is probably going to be something that looks like this. It's probably going to be a little hazy, a little soft, and see-through. That's kind of Photoshop's default, but what we're going to do is we're going to actually make this a really, really sharp shadow. And the way I'm going to do that is this. I'm going to take the opacity, I'm going to put all the way up to 100%. We are going to bring the size down to right around 5 so that it's not quite so soft. And then I'm going to bring the spread out to 100, which is all the way up at the top. And the distance, we're going to put it, well, right here at 20, which is actually right where it already was. But we also want to change the angle. You remember that when we did the red layer here, we did it at a 45-degree angle. So we want to do this drop shadow at about the same thing, except it won't be 45 degrees. It'll actually be 135 degrees because that's 45 degrees more than 90. And you can see what that does. That puts a little extra black here at the same angle as what we did for the red. And we're going to hit OK. And now we've pretty much got it to exactly where we want. Some of these lines look a little bit sloppy. If you want to, you can go in here to that layer with an erase tool, and you can clean those up just a little bit. And that's entirely up to you. I could spend all day doing this, but it would be an extremely long video. But I think that we have this where we want it. We're going to go ahead and collapse this up. This is not quite as centered as I'd like it to be, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Command T tool. I'm just going to raise this just slightly. And I think this is about where we want it to be. We now have our 3D effect applied, and we are ready to save this file. And then we are ready to move on to our next step. Our next step is going to be to add some well wishes. As you remember on these postcards, it doesn't usually just have the name of the place. It usually say greetings from or wish you were here. We're actually going to put both of those things on this this card, as you can see from the example here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to creating some warped text. So what we're going to do is we go over to our text tool and we draw a text box. And you can see that mine starts to already put stuff in. And if you remember last time we were working in impact because I wanted to give something that was nice and bold. It's a little bit of a pedestrian font, but it's one that I'm pretty sure most anybody watching this video has. So that's what it's defaulted to here. What we're going to do is I'm going to change it to, and every graphic designer friend of mine will probably kill me for this, but I'm going to put it at Brush Script MT, which is another very pedestrian font. But again, I want you guys to be able to do this with fonts that you probably already have. Not everybody has a gigantic font kit. So we're going to stick with Brush Script MT, even though it's very, very overused and probably got played out in the 1980s. We're going to go ahead and write in greetings from, and then we're going to pull down the box so it's as close to that text as possible. This is a little smaller than I want it to be, so we're going to use the Command T tool, and I'm going to pull this up in size just a little bit. The nice thing about that is we don't have to worry about it pixelating our text when we blow up the size, because it will just change the point size of the text. So we're going to pull it somewhere right about there. And then let's make a copy of that here in our Layers palette, and we have a second one. We're going to use our Command T tool to bring it down here. And we are going to write, wish you were here. We've run out of room, so I'm going to use the Command A to select all of that. And I'm going to bring down the point size a little bit. There we go. 30 points looks like it fits right in that box very nicely. Now, we don't want them to be straight like this. We want them to go all warpy and curvy, just like the word state does, so it looks like they all go together. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to go back to our greetings from, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit Command T, and we're going to rotate this just a little bit. We want it to at least start following the form of this. And then let's go to the Wish You Were Here. We'll do the same thing. We use Command T for our free transform tool. We rotate this just a little bit and try to fit it as close to here as possible. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and let it follow the shape of this. Now, if you remember, when we did the warp tool on the word state, we used the rise function, which gave it sort of a waving effect. But where greetings from is, it really only needs to have a little dip from here to here. So we're going to go to greetings from. We're going to double click on that T so it selects all of our text. We go back up here to our warp text tool that we used last time. And we are just going to do an arc. Right, but we don't need it to be in that direction, and we don't need it to be that severe. So we're going to grab that 50, and we're going to drag it down in the opposite direction. And it doesn't need to be very much, just a very slight little bit. Here it looks like about -7, just adds enough of a bend that it follows that form. Then we go to the Wish You Were Here layer, and we double click on that. And we go up to our warp text tool, and we do the same thing. We'd make an arc. Now this time we do want it in this direction, but definitely not that much. We're going to bend that up to, looks like 12 will probably do it. We're going to hit OK and see if we're right on that. Let's go to our move tool. It looks pretty close. We could sit here and tinker around with this more if we wanted to, but we don't want this video to be super long and boring because my voice is pretty much flat and boring enough. So let's go ahead and get through this. So we've got greetings from, Wish You Were Here. Now we've got a nice little sentiment to add to the word state. We're going to go up here to File. We're going to save our work, and then we are ready to move on to the next step. Our next step is going to be to make this design look as if it's actually printed on a piece of old paper. And what I mean by that is this. If you come in here and you look very close, the stroke that we've added on here is a very nice stark white. However, we've put this background layer on here that makes it look like it's an aged piece of paper. If this were an actual legitimate postcard, there would be nothing that is stark white. It would actually be the color of the paper. If you know anything about printing process, you're never really printing white. Anything that's white is really just the color of the paper that's underneath it. So if this had been an actual postcard, this color and all these bright colors would have aged along with the paper. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to add what's called a blending mode. And so I'll show you what that means. We're going to go here to our 3D text layer. And up here it says pass through, and then there's a little drop menu. We're going to click that drop menu, and we're going to go to something called multiply. And you can see what happens when we do that. It takes everything that's light and it drops it completely out. When you use the multiply mode, the only thing that you see are the dark parts. Anything that is white or light shows what you have underneath it. So we're going to click that here. We're going to do the same thing for the background photo. We're going to go to normal, and we're going to bring it to multiply. And what you can see, and I'll toggle this back and forth, if we undo that, you can see how everything was nice and bright, but now anything that was white is now the color of the background. You will notice that that does create a little bit of a problem for the word state, in that we can now, not only do we see the paper behind it, but we also see the columns and the man of the house that's also behind this as well. So what we want to do is we want to take this background photo and we want to trim away anything that is behind the word state. In order to do that, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to select everything about the word state, including the strokes and including the drop shadow. Now, of course, you will remember from our previous step that when we try to do that, it won't necessarily select the drop shadow or select any strokes. We have to outline those first. So we're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to take this entire 3D layer. We're going to make a copy of that group. And we are going to go up here to the right-hand corner. We're going to merge that group so we have flattened all of our effects. And if you turn off our 3D text, you can see it has flattened everything into one layer. Then hovering over that, we're going to hold down our command key and click on it so it selects everything that's there. And if you remember last time in our last video, we discussed using layer masks so that we could block out parts of photos. We're going to do the same thing to block out parts of photos here on our background. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to select the inverse. And you see what happens is that instead of selecting the ants just around this part that says state, it's now selecting the outside. What it means is that instead of selecting everything inside of here, it's selecting everything outside of that word state. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to this background photo, and we're going to go down here to the add a layer mask. We're going to click it, and it automatically selects everything that we wanted to keep. That was everything that we had on the outside of the word state. You can see that if you look at the word state here now, everything that was white, you can now see that slightly yellowed color of the paper behind it, but we don't see this photo either. So now we have created something that looks like it's actually printed on top of old aged paper as opposed to being stark white on top of an aged paper. At this point, we've done everything that we can do to make it look like it's actually printed on paper. So we're going to go up here to File. We're going to save our work. And at this point, if you wanted to stop, you could. I'm going to go through a few extra steps to add a little bit of added realism, but if you wanted to stop here and save it as a JPEG, you could, or if you wanted to save it for print, you can go ahead and skip ahead to the last step on this. I'll actually include a time code for that in the description. Otherwise, we're going to go through a couple more steps to make this look just a little bit more realistic. The next step is that we're going to add a halftone to this. Now, what is a halftone? It's not something that I showed in the original example. I just sort of jumped from the last step that we finished straight to the end without adding this, but we're going to do it on these last couple steps of the video. A halftone, if you've ever looked at something printed in a newspaper or in a magazine or in a textbook or anything that went on a printing press, if you look very, very closely, you'll notice that the imagery is not necessarily very, very smooth. It's actually made up of tiny little dot patterns in different colors that when combined together gives you a full color image. Of course, the cheaper that something is printed, the larger those dots are. It has a much bigger halftone. Something that was printed in the mid 20th century, like these postcards would have been, probably would have had a fairly decently sized halftone, or at least a noticeable one. So that's what we're going to add today. The way that we do this is we're going to take our 3D text copy that we made, and we're going to select our background photo, and we're going to drag them down here into a group together. And then we're going to call that group imagery because it contains all of the imagery that we have. If we turn that on and off, all we really have are these two text layers and the background image. But anything that we want to have imagery that we apply a halftone to is in this folder. Then we're going to copy that group, and then we'll turn off the original one. And with this copy, we're going to, as we did before with many other groups, we're going to go up to the top right-hand corner. We're going to go down to Merge Group and make this one flat thing. Then we are going to make a new layer, and we're going to paint that layer white. And then we're going to put it behind our imagery layer. And then we're going to go up to the imagery layer, and we are going to merge it down. So now we have everything as if it were on a clean white piece of paper. And I'll show you the reason why we're going to do that. We are going to use this image as a halftone to create a mask for this layer right here. What does that mean? Well, let's go back up to this one that we just created. We are going to have a nice medium gray here for our top color, and then we are going to have a white for our bottom color. And the reason why is this. You remember that when we add a mask to something, which we'll go ahead and do here to this group, anything that we paint in white is going to be visible. Anything that we paint in black is going to disappear. When something was done in a halftone, anything that was white was just not printed at all, and anything that was dark or had a color to it would have had the halftone pattern. So what we want to do is we're going to go up here, we're going to turn off this, and we're going to go to our flattened image here. We're going to go up to Filter, and we're going to go to this Filter Gallery. We pull that up, we have all these different artistic, brushstroke, distort, sketch, and under sketch you'll see there's one called halftone pattern. Now when we zoom in on that, you can kind of see exactly what the halftone is. If you've ever looked at a picture really, really closely, you've seen this before, you'll notice that it's not nice and smooth, it's made up of different dots. But what you'll notice here is that everything that is dark and everything that is light, everything that is dark has a series of dots, and everything that's light disappears. But when we make our mask, we're going to want everything to be in reverse. And what I mean by that is this. Let's cancel that out. Let's flip these colors so that white is in the front. Now we go up here to filter and go to the gallery, and you can see that everything is in reverse. Why is that important? Well, if we hit OK, now we have a black and white image here that we can select all, we copy that, turn it off, turn back on our group that has all of our images in it, and when we go to the layer mask, when we hover it over it, we're going to hit Option. And then when we click on the layer mask with the Option key held down, it shows us exactly what that mask looks like. With everything selected, the whole canvas selected, we are going to hit Command V to paste that halftone we just did in there. And now when we go back here, you can see that it has added this halftone pattern to everything. If we had done it with the colors reversed, and I'll show you an inverse to do that, notice how everything that's black disappears and everything looks like it's a negative. That's what we would have gotten if we had done this. But when we invert it, everything that we want to show up is masked out in white. Everything that we don't want to show up is masked out in a gray, because we don't want everything to completely disappear. Let's deselect. And if you look in there, you can see that everything has a slight little halftone pattern to it. It just adds a little bit of more realism. You'll notice that if we hold down over the mask and we hold down the Shift key, we can turn that mask on and off. You see that it also decreases a little bit of the saturation, but that kind of adds to the vintage feel of it. So at this point, we have now added a halftone. We can go ahead and trash our layer that had the halftone on it. We have our image with our halftone mask. We go up to File, we save our work, and we are ready to move on to our next step. We want this postcard to look like it's been around for a good number of years and is probably a little bit beat up. You don't necessarily have to do this. I certainly didn't include it on this version, but we're going to add it here. To do this, we're going to add yet another layer mask. Unfortunately, we already have a layer mask applied to this imagery group. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole group, drag it down to the folder icon, and make another group with this group inside of it. And the reason we do this is because now we can add a secondary mask that will apply to all of this. And we are going to go ahead and call this weathering so we understand why it's in this group. Now, how do we make it look weathered? Well, let's go ahead and add a mask with nothing in it just yet. I'm going to go up here to File, Open, and I actually have a resource to use for this called Crumple. And what this image is, this was a piece of paper that I printed black toner on and then crumbled it up and crumbled it up and crumbled it up until we had all these crease marks all over everything. Now, the reason why we have this is because we want every one of these white crease marks to look like it's a place where the ink has flaked away, where this postcard has been creased and beat up. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all, we're going to copy it, and let's close out this file, and we're going to go in here. We're not going to worry about putting it in the mask layer yet. We're just going to go ahead and paste it first. Now, one thing that we got to remember is that when we're doing our masks, the areas that we want to disappear need to be done in black. Well, that's a little bit of a problem with this because here, all the places that we want to disappear where there's a crease is done in white. So all we're going to do is we're going to use Command T first of all. I'm going to bring this down in size just a little bit, right about to there. And now what we're going to do is we are going to hit Command I. What that does is that flips this to its inverse. So now everything that was black is white, everything that is white is black, and this white is looking a little bit gray. I want this to be a little more stark, so I'm going to go up here to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast, and I'm going to turn the contrast up and the brightness up just a little bit. So now those whites shouldn't be gray, those whites should be white. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select all of this with this black and white layer selected. We're going to copy that by going to Edit, Copy. Let's turn this off, and just like before, we're going to go into our layer mask. We're going to hold down the Option key, click inside of it, and then we are going to paste it in here. Now you see it's pasted into our mask layer, and when we go back, you can see that every place where we had a crease is now sort of disappearing. Now, as I look at this, I realize that once we put the halftone in, we did kind of lose this background photo just a little bit, even more so now that we've added the weathering. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this group, Then we open up this group, and we can go all the way down here to the photo, and look, it's still down here at 40%. We can pull this up just a little bit. Let's pull it up to, say, let's move it to 55. Now we can see that photo just a little bit more. Now, if you feel like this is too much of a crackle, if you feel like we're losing too much of the image, you can always select this layer mask and we can lighten it a little bit. And by that I mean we can go in here, we can hit mode or adjustments under image, we can go to our brightness and contrast, and we can turn the brightness up a little bit so that everything that's black is a little bit more of a gray. And you'll remember that in our layer masks, when something is gray, it just means that things can be seen through a little bit more. We hit OK, we go back to it, and you see that it's not quite as severe as it was. So now what we have is we have something that looks like it has been printed on aged paper. It looks like it has been done in a halftone, and it looks like it's had some weathering. It's been beat up over several decades of being kicked around. So now we go up here to File. We're going to save our work, and now we are ready to do the final step, which is to send this, get it ready to be printed. So welcome to the last step. If you've skipped over steps 7 and 8 and you're coming here straight from when we put things in multiply mode, what we've done is we've added a little bit of weathering, as you can see here with all these cracks and creases, and we've added some halftone, which you can see here in the image, this little dot pattern. You may have skipped straight here, so you might not have these effects. If not, it's okay. This is all going to be the same. Now, if you are coming here from step 8, one thing that I did forget to do is to take Wish You Were Here and Greetings From and make those look cracked and weathered just like everything else. That's easy enough to do. We can select both of those layers. We can open up this group that has the weathering mask on it. We drag both of those inside that group. And look, now you can see those have the same crackle effect too. If you skipped steps 7 and 8, don't worry about it. You don't even have to worry about what we're talking about. But now we can go ahead and start finalizing this thing. Now, you'll remember if you saw the last video where I showed you how to originally put photographs inside of letter forms, I talked about working in RGB color mode. If you don't understand color modes, there's two main, there's several color modes, but the two main ones that we work in are RGB or CMYK. And what RGB stands for is red, green, blue. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. RGB is the native color mode that are used by digital screens. If you ever put your face really, really close to a television screen when you were a little kid, you probably noticed that the picture started to be made up of just a whole bunch of tiny little color bars that were red, green, and blue. No, just me. Okay, I was a stupid kid, so nobody else did that but me. Okay, that's fine. At any rate, if this is something that you wanted to just put online, or if you were using it only for digital, you could keep it here in this RGB color mode. If you want to print it, though, you're going to want it to put it over to CMYK. CMYK, again, stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And those are the 4 different pigments that are used on printing presses, or even in laser printers. It's a combination of those 4 colors that gives you full color images. Important thing to remember is even if we put this thing into CMYK, it's not really showing a CMYK because you're still looking at it on a digital screen. All it's really doing is giving you an RGB interpretation of what CMYK will look like when you send it to print. So it's not going to be exact. Of course, that begs the question, well, why don't you just work in it in CMYK from the beginning if you know you want to print it? Well, the reason why is because when you put it into to CMYK color mode, you lose a lot of your opportunities for layer effects. You could go up here to the filter gallery, or you could go up here to color effects and find out that there's a lot of things that are no longer available because you're no longer working in RGB. You're no longer working in the native color language of the computer screen. So I tend to work in RGB first and then switch everything over to CMYK when we're about to print. Now that was a heck of a mouthful, so I'm just going to show you what we do here. When we send something to CMYK, one thing we're probably going to do is lose some layer effects. So instead of doing that, if we want to send this to print, we are going to, well, first let's go ahead and do this. Let's go up to File and go to, instead of Save, we're going to go to Save As. We're going to make a copy of this. We're going to call this Vintage Postcard CMYK Flat. Why do we call it that? Because in order to keep us from losing any layer effects or any color effects, we're just going to go ahead and flatten all of this. So we're going to take the layers that we're not using anymore. We are going to drag them down to the trash can. And then we're going to take whatever we have left. We're going to select them all. We're going to go here to the layers palette. We're going to click that top right menu, and we're going to go to flatten image. Now everything is one flattened piece. I can't even turn it on and off because it's all just one flattened piece. There's nothing behind it. Then we will go up to image, and we'll go to mode, and we will change the color mode to CMYK. And see, it wants to give us a little bit of a warning that we're about to do that. And now we've changed the color mode. And then we're going to go up to File. And we want to go ahead and save this as maybe something other than a PSD file. It's typically better when you have a flattened file and you're sending it to a printer, not to send it in Photoshop, but you can actually send it in a variety of different other file types. The two that I tend to use the most are JPEGs or TIFF files. JPEGs tend to parse down your data a little bit, so sometimes it could mess with the quality of your image. TIFF files are usually pretty good, so we could do this as either one because it's still 300 dpi. We're going to save it as a TIFF file. We're going to hit save. We're not going to do any image compression. We're going to hit OK. And there we are. If you were going to use this somewhere on the internet, you wouldn't want to use TIFF. You could probably go ahead and save this instead as a JPEG. And actually, ideally, if you were going to use this on the internet, sometimes browsers or internet or any kind of digital application won't recognize it if it's in CMYK. It wants to see it in its native color language. So you'd probably want to change it back to RGB color and save it as a JPEG. And there you have it. There is our vintage postcard. It's been a lot of steps, but you hung in there with me, and I think that this looks fairly authentic. I hope you agree, and I hope that you filled in this portion with the name of your state. And if you haven't, well, I hope you come and visit us in state because it's the most beautiful place in the world to live, and, well, we wish you were here. Hey guys, thanks for watching my video. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you found it helpful. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Otherwise, go forth, make cool stuff, and I'll see you next time.